Hey y'all! In this video we're going to get into importing files into the Vectric software from outside sources, files that we haven't created ourselves. A good example of this would be the free monthly project files from Vectric Limited that you can download from their website when you sign into your V & Company account. This is the file that we're going to cut today. And it's a simple home sweet home sign, and it is a rather simple VCarve project. Here we have these flowers at the ends, and we have some text. We have a VCarve border and a chamfer out here on the edge, but we also have this vertical texture, which I thought was a neat contrast and we hadn't really played with before. To get the file for this home sweet home sign, I really had to dig down deep into the old treasure chest to find it. The file came from a blog post from the Vectric Labs blog, December of 2014. Now I'll put a link in the description box to this blog post where you can come and download the file yourself. Link is right here, and as you can see it's a zip file. So you'll need to download it to your computer and unzip the file to get to the CRV. He also talks a little bit about the file here and some of the changes he would make if he were going to do it all over again. I have already downloaded the file and unzipped it. I've already opened it in VCarve to make sure that it works. So it's already up here in my recently opened files. And we'll go ahead and we'll load that file right now. Now, on first glance, it appears to be ready to use, and for the most part it is. But when you download a file, what you need to do is start from the very beginning to make absolutely certain that this file matches your material, your CNC, your tools, and your setup. So the first thing we'll do is we'll get into job setup. And this will be a single-sided job. The width here is 24 inches. Now I have a piece of material in mind that I'm going to use to cut this, and I can cut this down to 24 inches, so this is not a problem. The height in Y, however, is 6 inches. My material isn't that big. It's 5 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to use the calculator built into Vectric to figure out what 5/8 of an inch is, the decimal equivalent. And I'll do that by typing 5/8, then hitting the equals sign on my keyboard. Now I know that 0.625 is 5/8. Now I can add the 5 inches up here at the beginning. My material changes and I'm all set. The thickness of my material, they have 0.466. My material is 13/16 of an inch thick. So again, I'm going to use the built-in calculator to type in 13/16, tap the equals button. Now I have the material thickness entered here. I'm using inches. My Z0 position, I'm setting to the material surface. Because I don't really have any layout to do, it's already been done for me. I'm going to go ahead and leave my XY datum at the lower left position, because that's where I set my X, Y, and Z0 out on the machine. I'm going to leave everything else the way it is. Click OK. Immediately we can see when I change the width or the height in Y of my material, all of this got changed. It's no longer centered. So I'm going to hold down the control button on my keyboard, tap the letter A to select all of the vectors. Then I'll come over here to align selected objects and align it to the material. I want to center it vertically as well as horizontally. Then I can come down here and click close, and we're all set. So that's the first modification we're going to make. We're going to jump into job setup, enter our actual dimensions of the material we're going to use to cut this project, do any realignment if necessary, and then we can proceed. Since I've done that, I'm going to go up here to File, click Save, and save that file. That saves those changes we've made so far. Now we're ready to go over and check out the toolpaths. So I'll switch over to the Toolpath tab, and we see they already have these toolpaths set up. So if I put a check mark in Texture toolpath, we don't see anything. Well, why don't we see anything? Because the Texture toolpath doesn't really have any vectors. VCarve 1 does have vectors. But we see, if we zoom in, these toolpaths are way, way, way off. We need to recalculate these because we've moved the vectors on our material. So I'll uncheck. I'll come back up here because Texture relies so heavily on these other toolpaths. I'm going to recalculate it last. So the first thing I'm going to do is come down here and I'm going to recalculate the Profile 2, which is the outside cutout of our project. We can see it's still trying to cut way up here when the profile is down here. So I'll double click that profile, and we're going to start at the top. The cut depth for this is based off of the old material thickness. So I need to change that because my material thickness is different from theirs. So I'm going to do what I always do, type in Z plus 0.005 because I want the bit to cut 0.005 of an inch deeper than the material thickness. Then tap the equals button and it's adjusted the cut depth up here. They're using a 1/4 inch end mill. That's fine. But I still need to get in and make sure that the 1/4 inch end mill that they're using matches mine. What I mean by that is their selection, their 1/4 inch end mill, their feeds and speeds may be different. So I'm going to choose my 1/4 inch end mill using my feeds and speeds. Click OK, and now we see mine's going to take 7 passes, where before theirs was going to take 4. Because this is an outside profile toolpath, I want to cut to the outside. Climb or conventional, that's up to you. I prefer to do a separate last pass with an allowance of 0.01. This means the bit's going to cut the first 6 passes just slightly larger, slightly to the outside by 0.010 of an inch of this vector. Then on the last pass, the bit will come in that 0.010 of an inch and cut the entire profile of this project at full depth. Make certain the bit that you're using has a cutting edge large enough, deep enough to cut this deep. Add tabs has already been done. The tabs they're using are 1/2 inch by 0.15, a little more than 1/8 of an inch thick. That's fine, but I'm going to use 3D tabs. I'm not going to worry about ramping the toolpath. I am going to make sure I have sharp external corners selected. We'll come down here. I'm going to change the name of it to Profile Cutout just to avoid confusion there. And we'll click Calculate. It's warning me the tool will cut through the material. I know that. And we see that the tool path has dropped down from here. It's no longer trying to cut out on the edge. It's centered itself within the material. Now I'll close this. I'll move up, uncheck that, move up to Profile 1, and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to go through and make sure that all of these settings here will match my machine, match my tools. They've selected a cutting depth of 0.1. I'm going to leave that alone. That's what I would set it at as well. Now they're using a V-bit, a 90-degree V-bit with a 1/2 inch cutting diameter. Let's take a look at what their parameters are. They're running a feed rate of 100 inches per minute and a plunge rate of 30 inches per minute. Well, that may work fine for your machine. It may not work fine for your machine. So I'll cancel that. I'm going to select my V-bit, which is slightly larger. My V-bit is a Bosch 9/16 diameter V-bit, and I have my own feeds and speeds set for that. This is what I mean. These tool paths were calculated for their machine, which could be a big professional machine that's capable of cutting through 13/16 inch thick cherry in one pass. Mine isn't quite that stout, so I have to adjust for my CNC machine. I've got that bit selected. I'll click OK. The rest of this I'm going to leave alone. I don't need to change outside. They're using an allowance offset. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not going to do a separate last pass with this. I'm going to come down here and call this Profile VCarve so that I know this is the one that uses the V-bit. And I'll click Calculate. This is the tool path that is carving the chamfer on the outside of the project and that V-groove detail inside the project. I'll uncheck that and now close the preview window, and I'll come up here to VCarve number 1. This is the text. So we're going to be using a start depth of 0. Flat depth is not selected. Again, I'm going to select my own 90-degree V-bit here using my own feeds and speeds. Click OK. Because I'm not using a flat depth, all of this is grayed out. I'll go ahead and change the name to VCarve text. It's also going to cut those flowers. Click Calculate. And there's our tool path there. Now we're going to get into the texture. Because all these others have been recalculated, this should work on its own. Double click Texture. I'm going to change none of these settings. None of them. Except use my V-bit. I have my Bosch V-bit set up here, and I'll calculate. There is the texture toolpath that it's going to cut. Now, I have not previewed any of these toolpaths, so what we'll do is we'll go through one by one and see how they look. I've got texture highlighted. I'll go ahead and preview that selected toolpath. And we see here that because I have my toolpath color set to black, we can see what texture that's going to carve in the material. We'll go to VCarve Text, preview that toolpath, and that's going to carve our text and those flowers on the ends. Now I've colored those dark green so that we can zoom in here and see the difference. You get a little bit of contrast and I can see what's going on. And we see how these texturing marks are spaced away from the text. They don't interfere with the text at all. It just kind of fills in a little bit and gives some interest in an otherwise blank area. Go ahead and zoom back out to a straight Z view. Now we'll preview our profile VCarve. Preview that selected toolpath. I've colored those a little bit lighter green. And we can see here the detail V-carving in here in the center. Also cuts into these texture lines. Cleans up any rough edges here so that we don't have to worry about any additional sanding needed around this area here. I think it just gives a nice level of detail. Also have our chamfer cut for the outside profile. We'll go ahead and we'll preview that profile cutout. Preview that selected toolpath. There we go. My tabs are nice and thick, a little more than 1/8 of an inch thick, and they're about a 1/2 inch long. They'll be easy to clean up. All in all, I think this is going to be a nice project. This is what we want to do. I'm ready to save G-code and take it outside, start cutting on the CNC. So to do that, I'm going to come up here and hover my mouse cursor over each toolpath's name. And I see that this one uses a 90-degree V-bit, so I'll put a check mark there. This one also uses a 90-degree V-bit. I can put a check mark here. This one also uses the 90-degree V-bit. I can put a check mark there. This one uses a 1/4 inch end mill. I'll leave it blank. Now I'll come up to Save Toolpath, put a check mark and output all visible toolpaths to one file. Every toolpath I have down here that uses a V-bit is going to be saved to this one file. My post processor is selected. This is something that is a set it and forget it kind of an operation. Once you have the correct post processor, you'll more than likely never touch this again. And I'll click on Save Toolpaths. I'll go ahead and save it in this folder, and I'm going to name this toolpath 90-degree V-bit texture text flowers. Then I'll save that. Once that's saved, I can uncheck all of these toolpaths, check my profile cutout, make sure that this is all up here correctly. Save toolpaths, profile cutout is already highlighted. I'm just going to add 2.5 inch end mill. I know it's 0.25. I know it's not a 25 inch end mill. And I'll save the toolpath. Now I'm ready to take those two G-code files outside to the CNC and get ready to cut.
Okay, with the files transferred over onto the computer, I fired up Mach 3, I have the CNC homed. Now I'm ready to mount the piece of material to the table. Now I'm going to be cutting this project out of this piece of cherry. We entered 5 5/8 inch for the width because, as you can see, one of these edges is surfaced, it's nice and smooth, but the other edge is rough sawn. 5 5/8 of an inch happened to be the narrowest measurement I got from side to side here. And to make sure that I get that piece of material lined up with the x-axis travel on my CNC, I'm going to use this alignment jig that I made in a previous video. Now I'll put a link to that video where I showed how I made this alignment jig down in the description box below. You can check that out if you'd like to. For actually mounting the piece of material to the table, I'm going to use my tried and true masking tape and CA glue method. That way I don't have any screws to concern myself with, no clamps to concern myself with. It'll hold this piece of material down firmly through all of the machining operations we're going to do. As I demonstrated before, I'm going to put my straight edge into place and torque it down. Just snug it up. This is temporary. Then I'll place the smooth edge of my material up against this edge. Okay, with this mounted firmly, this piece of material is going nowhere. I've taken down my jig. I no longer need it. I know that this edge is going to run parallel to the x-axis on my CNC. Now I can start with my first bit. And that is going to be my 90-degree V-bit. And again, I'll put a link in the description box below to all of the tools and bits, supplies I use in this video. I'll go ahead and get this installed, chucked in my router, set my X, Y, and Z 0, load the G-code, and run this first toolpath. And now it's time for a tool change. So let me bring my router up, shut off my lockout. For the profile toolpath, I'm going to be using this Amana Spectra coated 1/4 inch downcut end mill. Now, that's the first time I've used this bit. We'll see how it goes. I've not had this bit in the router yet, so we'll find out. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and cut it out from the tabs and take it off the table. So I'll go ahead and use my oscillating multi-tool for this. And an old dead wood chisel makes quick work of lifting this piece up off the table. There we go. Now all I need to do is peel the tape off of it. Then I can sand these tabs off and do some more detail sanding and get to finishing. Now, I went ahead and I did a little bit of preliminary sanding on the piece, but I have not completely finished it. I did go ahead and sand off those tabs, as you can see here. And I have to tell you, I'm in love with that Amana Spectra bit. I mean, look at this thing. End grain, side grain, it doesn't care. Not a bit of burning, not a bit of chip out. It just sliced through that. And those of you who've been woodworking for more than a week or two, you know that you can burn cherry just loading it in the truck if you don't do it right. So we're going to go ahead and leave this as it is right now. I'll get into finishing this project in another video. I've had a lot of questions from people asking me how I finish a VCarve sign. And this video is too long as it is. If you got anything out of this video, I do hope you'll give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to follow along with some of my other CNC adventures and follow along with some of the Vectric Software tutorials, I do hope you'll think about subscribing to my channel. Now, I'll put links in the description box below to a number of things. My website, where you can get a little bit more information, or hit the t-shirt shop and check out a t-shirt or coffee mug. I'll leave a link in the description to Dave Gatton's homepage where you can check out, get a little bit more information on a Gatton CNC of your own. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video here. Whether you subscribe to my channel or not, thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and y'all take care.